Greetings, everyone. Matthew Kramer here with our final mocktails and masterpieces of the season. We are closing our 22-23 concert season with Beethoven's Fidelio. For many of you who have followed the ICO for a number of years, you know that this was originally slated to close our May 2020 concert program, but of course that came to a grinding halt. We had hoped for many years to get this rescheduled, and we're delighted now it's no longer the Beethoven year, but to produce his great opera, Fidelio. I'm joined on this program by our all-star cast here, the three principal roles, Marcy, Stonikas, Leonore, Jamie, Flora, Florestan, and Kevin Langan, Rocco. Welcome to all three of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Marcy, I thought I'd start with you. I would just love to hear a little bit about you, if you wouldn't mind sharing, but also your history with this role, and tell us about Leonore Fidelio.
Sure, absolutely. My pleasure. Let's see. It's always hard to figure out where to start, isn't it? I am currently living in Tallahassee, Florida. I'm originally from the Midwest, though, so I'm excited to get back to Indianapolis. And, you know, you feel right at home when you're in the Midwest, when you're from there, you know. So I'm originally from a suburb of Chicago, and I've been all around the U.S., but settled into Tallahassee because I teach at Florida State University currently. And this role is one of my favorites, honestly, to do. It's been a little while since I've had the opportunity to do it, but I made my debut over 10 years ago, singing it for the first time with Seattle Opera. And I've gotten to do it in Austria, in Vienna, which is amazing because, you know, kind of birthplace of Beethoven. They're very particular about their Beethoven in Vienna. So that was a really cool experience. And I think that the role of Leonora is one of the roles that I like playing the most because I find her to be the most relatable in the real world and also even currently. You know, it doesn't feel, her character doesn't feel aged or like passé in any way to me. She's really strong. She's really passionate. She's obviously, you know, one of those amazing sopranos that kind of are few and far between, where they're the hero of the story, and they don't need anybody to rescue them, and rather she's doing the rescuing. And I really love being able to play that kind of role. And you know, she kind of, I feel like the first time I played Leonora, it made me. I am married and I have a son, so I feel like it gave me this higher purpose. I was like, oh gosh, I need to be a better wife. So that was kind of a reality check for me, I guess, when I was like, if this woman is willing to go to these lengths for her husband, am I willing to do that for mine? And you know, of course I am, but I hope that never comes to pass, anything like it. So, but it's always a joy to sing. So I'm really excited to do it.
And Jamie, you and I have a history that goes way back. I was just thinking about this. You know, we've done 3 operas together, with Magic Flute, Madame Butterfly, and Traviata, and concert arias together. But it's great to see you again, and welcome to Indianapolis.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you. I too am a Midwesterner, and we even have a history. I tell people that we have an unusual history because we grew up 20 minutes apart, and we're a year apart in school. And we didn't meet until I sang with Buffalo Phil for a concert. That's right. And that was fun, and it's been a wonderful opportunity every time to collaborate with you, Maestro. And I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Ohio, but I was born in Indiana. My whole family on my mother's side is from Indiana, and I have family who live in suburbs of Indianapolis. I also did my master's at Florida State University.
Oh,
and yeah, I currently teach at the University of New Mexico, and my family, with my wife, who is also a voice professor at the University of Mexico, and we're half the faculty. And we have 2 daughters, and this is my first time singing Florestan. I have never sung it. Over the years, I started singing lighter repertoire, and as I've aged, I say this is from having daughters. I have 2. So has my voice, and it's grown, and I've started singing things more like Cavaradossi and Karloff, and now I'm branching into some Germanic repertoire, and I really love it. I I must be a sucker for punishment. I think maybe it's because I was a trumpet player as I grew up. I love roles like this that just stay high and just go and go and go. And so this is, I'm excited to do it. The first time I sang Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, I was like, this is awesome. And all my friends were like, what? So, yeah, Beethoven doesn't like to let you breathe. I think he thinks we're like violinists or cellists or something, and we're not. That is interesting. That is interesting. But I think Florestan, like as Marcy said, he's secondary. She's the hero, and I think he's just grateful to get another shot. I think when we see him in Act 2, he has given up hope, and I think these are the kind of the last throes of maybe life for him. And then all of a sudden, his world changes on a dime, and that I think is really compelling. I think it's really good theater, which maybe we don't always get in some of the Beethoven songs that he has composed. But it's a privilege to sing. I'm excited about doing this role for the first time with this company and with you, Maestro, because I feel comfortable with you. You know, we've like you said, we have a nice history, and I feel like we have a simpatico, and so that's exciting. That's exciting, and I'm excited to meet my new colleagues and work with them. And I'm excited to sing back in Indianapolis. I've never sung in Indianapolis. I've been to Indianapolis a million times, and I've never sung there. So that'll be lovely. I was just back in Bloomington in February. My wife is 100% Cuban, and we did a whole Cuban recital at Indiana University. And that was super fun. And so it'll be nice to be back in the humidity. It's quite dry here. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
I'll send some to you.
I'm sure you have it.
And Kevin, welcome on board. It's just a thrill to meet you, and we're looking forward to welcoming you to Indianapolis as well. But if you could tell us about yourself and Rocco.
Sure. Yeah, I live in New Jersey now. So I'm an Eastern boy. I was born in New York, but I got my music education at Indiana University in Bloomington. I was at Indiana from 1975 until 1980. Got both my bachelor and master's there. Met my wife there. She's also a singer. She's now retired. She was a famous Queen of the Night all over the world. Sally Wolf is her singing name, but now she's on the faculty at AVA. She's a voice teacher at AVA, and I teach privately, but I'm still out there singing. This is 45 years for me now that I've been in the business, and in fact, I'm coming full circle because my first professional paying job was the Messiah with the Indianapolis Symphony in 1978.
Get out of here. That's great.
Yeah. So I really feel like I'm coming full circle. I'm coming back to Indianapolis after all these years, to be able to do this opera. And this opera's been in my repertoire. I have my sheet here because I had to count how many times. This is my 8th production.
Wow.
My first time of doing it was 1982. So it was a long time ago. Probably some of you weren't even born.
I was definitely born.
There you go. But that was my first one. It was out in California, Orange County Pacific Symphony. And we did it in a venue at Knott's Berry Farm, which is an amusement park. Okay.
Awesome.
That's fun.
Yeah. And in the middle of this amusement park, and everybody's going on all the rides, we're there doing a concert version of Fidelio. So I thought, now that's pretty interesting. So that's where I started off. And it was a concert version. But I also did it. I've got my list here. I did it at Caramore Festival in 1989. We did the original Leonore version of the opera that time. So it's a little bit different. In fact, the biggest difference, I think, is for the tenor. Instead of coming in on the high G at the beginning of his aria, I think he has to come in on a high B flat, even above that, on the word got in the original version. So that was a real challenge. But it was fun doing that version. It was, a lot of it's similar, but there were some differences, especially in the orchestra parts when we did that. But I also did it, Cincinnati May Festival, 1990, concert version. I also did it, Marcy, in Seattle Opera in 2003.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, back then. That was a stage production that we did. And Pittsburgh Opera in 2005, San Francisco Symphony concert version in 2015 with Michael Tilson Thomas. And then New Amsterdam Opera, which is a new company in New York that does concert opera, in 2016. So this is number 8 for me. And I love the role because I'm now finally the right age to do it. You know, being a bass, most of your repertoire, you're playing an old man or a king or a father, you know, and you're doing all these when you're in your 20s and 30s, and you have no frame of reference in life to sometimes do these roles. Now that I'm an older man, I feel like this is when I should be doing Rocco and Sarastro and things like that. So it's really exciting to come to it now at this age with life experience behind me, because this guy he's like an every time a common dad who, you know, loves his daughter very much, and he's very proud to have what he thinks is this young man come into the family.
Yeah.
This will be a good husband for his daughter, but he kind of is the reactionary in the opera. Everything, you know, he has to react to everything that happens in the opera in different ways, and how to deal with it when he finds out all about what's going on. But it's a fun role to do. But I'll have to say, Beethoven is hard to sing. You're right when you were saying that earlier, Matthew. He only wrote one opera, number 1.
Right.
This is it. And I also agree with Florestan when he said that he makes you it makes you feel like you have to be an instrumentalist when you're singing his music. There is no place to breathe half the time. And especially in this opera, when we do the trio in the first act, and later in the second act, the quartet, you really have to be, you find you're doing a lot of catch breathing all the time in order to stay in tempo and not get behind, you know. So it's really kind of difficult. I don't think he understood the singing voice and what it takes to breathe between phrases. He kind of looks at you like you're a string instrument where all you got to do is lift the bow and reattack real quick. And we can't react sometimes that fast. But anyway, I always find sometimes that I'm getting behind when I'm singing this. The conductor says, you're behind, you got behind me there. And it's because you have to take so many fast breaths to stay in tempo and together with the orchestra. But it's a lot of fun to do. It's a great piece. And the thing I love about it is it's the transition from the classical era to the romantic era. Inside of this opera, you've got the first act is in the style of the classic period, Mozart, what came before, and all of a sudden, second act, when the tenor comes in to sing, you're in the romantic period. And I think that's fascinating to see it happen like that in the middle of an opera, that you're actually going into a new era of music like that. And because the first part is more standard arias, trios, duets, whatnot. Second act kind of becomes more like what you're going to hear in Wagner, what you're going to hear in Verdi and whatnot. So that's fun to see happen in the middle of this opera. So it's one of the things that I love about it, because this opera was only 15 years after Magic Flute. You know, right. It's the first part, the beginning of the Romantic period. And my character, I kind of think of him a little bit along the lines of a Papageno, you know, because my aria is very strophic, just like Papageno's aria is in the Magic Flute. And he's that kind of a character. He's an older man. He's not a young guy, and a fantasy character, but the style of the music kind of reminds me of a Papageno, the way Beethoven's written it. But it's always fun to do. And you wind up doing more concert versions of this than you do stage versions. I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I've found that over the 8 that I've done, only 2 have been staged out of the 8 productions that I've done. So it's kind of nice that we're kind of mixing this one. I've never done it where it's semi-staged, you know, so I don't know how far we're going with it yet. We haven't talked about that on stage. You know, I was told to send costume measurements, so I guess we're going to be wearing costumes, which is great. And I don't know how many I have a lot of props in this opera if we're going that route, especially in the second act, in the melodrama, when we're down in the bowels of the earth, you know, digging everything. So I don't know how far we're going to go with that, but it's a lot of fun when you can add all that into it. So I look forward.
Really interesting things that you mentioned there, Kevin. And of course, about the history of the opera, it said that Beethoven wrote the same opera 3 times.
Right.
They are so dramatically different.
It's like he heard it and then said, no, I'm not happy with it. I'm going to change this, change that. Yeah.
A lot of persuasion by friends and colleagues of his to alter certain things. But I am interested in staying on this topic a little bit. And hearing, of course, Marcy, you're as the lead role here, your thoughts on this, that I'm a violinist, you know, in youth orchestras. I started off with almost all of the Beethoven symphonies, playing those high violin lines, which we were just discussing. But it is discussed regularly about Beethoven's vocal styles, let's put it that way, that the true successors of this opera are the Missa Solemnis or the Ninth Symphony, that this vocal, it's notorious for its trappings for the voice. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on Leonora.
In general, yeah. I mean, I completely agree with everything that Jamie and Kevin have both said, and that you've so beautifully articulated, Matthew, is that it is really, really challenging. It doesn't seem like Beethoven had a really firm grasp on the differences between vocal music and instrumental. And obviously, the music is beautifully written. It's very exciting. You feel very emotional. You get a very clear picture of what's happening through the music. But I think partly because of his not expertise, I guess I could say, in writing those vocal lines, you sometimes get a little too excited when you're singing the lines as well, because you're literally just trying to keep your larynx from, exiting your mouth. So I think one of the things that I worked on really, really early on when I was first learning the role was how to make that happen, how to make it so that it didn't feel so that I could be part of the orchestra, really, because that's always kind of my goal anyway, whether it is singing Wagner or Strauss or anything. I always think about the vocal line kind of riding along with the orchestra as it is. So I'm always just trying to figure out where in the texture I fit. Fortunately, because of the kind of rep that I do a lot of Germanic repertoire, so it fits my voice fine. Like, I think I struggle less with Beethoven than some other people I have met. I guess I'm lucky, but I also don't apologize when I have to take a breath. If it's within a really tough line and I have to breathe and break up a word even, I just do it. Because sometimes there's just no other way to make it happen.
You have to live.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want it. You don't want your leads passing out in the middle of the stage, in the middle of a phrase. That's right. Not ideal. So I always figure, breathe or fall, or die. Those are the options. So but fortunately, I have never gotten any pushback from anybody when I've kind of made those allowances for myself. And I've even asked for their opinion, for various coaches and conductors' opinions on, do you think it's okay if I breathe right here? Do you think it's problematic if I breathe right here? So over the years, that has also morphed and changed just as my voice continues to age. So I can, it's interesting to see now. The last time I sang the role was actually 6 years ago. And so it's interesting kind of as I'm getting it back into my voice to see what's easier than it was the last time even.
Oh, thank you for that. Another interesting topic that Kevin, you had brought up was the idea of staging this. And I've heard for many years, and I do believe that this opera lends itself very well to concert stagings or semi-staging, because it really, you have this two, the first act and second act that you're looking at here. And we can do a lot with lighting for the second act alone. And our director, John Truitt, is also playing Pizarro. I've had the opportunity to work with him and Barbara of Seville a few years ago at the Indianapolis Opera. Very creative in his use of resources for concert versions. But it does ultimately for you, even with all three of yours extensive stage experience over many years, doing things in the span of 5 days versus your typical operatic production of 3 weeks is a real game changer in many respects. And it does, obviously, your familiarity with the role helps considerably. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Jamie, maybe we start with you about, getting the full operatic rehearsal period versus something that's put together very, very quickly like this, which we've done on many occasions.
Yes. So 5 days after I finish with y'all in Indianapolis, I'm going to go to Vermont and I'll do it again, fully staged.
Oh,
and so yes, with Opera Company Middlebury. So it'll be a completely different experience there. I think what I will say is, as a young artist at Pittsburgh Opera, there are a lot of things, and I think Marcy can speak to this with Seattle, where you're just thrown in and you got to go and you got to make a show. And so I think as long as you have good colleagues that are willing to work together, I think you have to speed up your process. You have to take notes as you stage really, really carefully so that and you go home and you look at what you put in your score as you were going along. Whereas maybe in a longer extended process, you can try some things. Maybe I won't note take as much. you know, because we'll do it again the next day, and then we'll mess around with it a little more and take a little more time. Where this, you got to get it, it's got to be done, and you got to move on. And so I think that's important with semi-stage things. As far as as far as concert versions, I think that used to be a little more static, but I think with today's audience, I think they have to be a lot more dramatically involved. And so so I'm glad we're using costumes. I hope there aren't too many props for you, Kevin.
Yeah.
The props always make me nervous. I'm like, oh, I got to do stuff with my hands. I just want to sing. But yeah, it's exciting. It's really fast. And I think it just is a different kind of challenge. You know, it's like racers taking a different course, you know, like it's just a slightly different course than maybe what you normally do.
Yeah.
It looks like you have a pit in the venue that we're performing in. I saw some pictures of the theater. Is that correct, Matthew?
It is, and it's not a very large pit, and it's
Right.
very difficult to work in. I've done there's no hydraulic lift, so the orchestra is really very, very far down. It's just they did all of this remarkable work on this facility, and then at the very end, it's like the pit, you know. So Mansfield Park, I conducted there. It's for piano four hands, and I was the only one in the pit, and I just kind of popped out of a little hole at the piano stage. But in this case, the orchestra will be on stage. And that's another thing that, you know, to discuss here, the orchestra is to your back. We'll have the monitors in the front so you can see the video line with me, but it is part of this experience. And Kevin, you've had this experience obviously with this opera before too.
Yeah. So that's what I wasn't sure if you were going to be in front of us in a pit or on the side, or behind us. Because that makes a big difference. Because of this opera, because it is hard to sing, it's hard to keep it together, singers and orchestra, because of the fast pace and a lot of the numbers. So, and I've always found that, you know, there are spots in the opera where you will tend to get behind if you're not careful. So it has to be experienced in the role now and know where those come, you know, when you're doing a very fast production like this in 5 days and getting it ready. So
one advantage I found of having the orchestra on stage at times is that, Marcy, to your point, you're kind of embedded inside of the orchestra, even though your back might be turned, that gulf of a distance. Which sometimes, you know, opera holds together by a wing and a prayer, just a miracle that it even does anyways. But I've always enjoyed, and especially to have the video element here. And, you know, Marcy, your thought with you know, putting things together in a short amount of time. I'm interested in your experience.
I think in general, the way I think what happens whenever you get in the room and you're doing, you know, we always call it the first day of school. Whenever you have your first day of school, you get like a really good idea of like what's going to happen and how things are going to run. But I think one of the coolest parts of like every production that I've ever been a part of is that we have this amazing ability to kind of come together as a group and focus all of our energy very specifically towards this one task and this one goal for a successful performance or run or whatever it is. And I think it's amazing to think about what can be achieved in a really short amount of time with that kind of focus and that kind of intense energy. You know, that's all we're doing during those days that we're there. And it helps kind of drown out the noise of the everyday other things that are happening, which obviously will still continue outside of rehearsal, but while we're in there, we're kind of immersed. And so it makes it possible. It's kind of like Middlebury if you go for a language. Like when you go in that immerse study land, you can get a lot done in a really short amount of time. And but it does obviously help to have, you know, back experience and like have it in your voice and be ready to go.
Of course. I want to thank all three of you, not only for joining me for this video segment here, but for your incredible work as artists. And we look forward to welcoming you to Indianapolis for the ICO season finale, Beethoven's Fidelio. Thanks, everyone.
thank you very much.
Thank you.